lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic emanates, biomembranes is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor and Lord and master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Jai Shri Prabhupada, Shri Prabhupada. Okay. It's marigolds.
He's allergic to
I'm allergic to marigolds. It's one of these
Just made his shoulders shake.
problems with having a material body. Many problems with material bodies, isn't it? So I was sorry I have to sit on a seat, but I was getting cramps yesterday from sitting so long like that. And it was affecting me most of the day, so. Anyway, life in the material world. You'll all experience old age one day soon.
If we live long enough.
Jayo Radha Govinda Kunya Vihare Jayo Radha Govinda Kunya Vihare Jana Balabha Girivaradhare Gopi Jana Balabha Girivaradhare Jana Pradayana Ranjana Sodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Ona Tera Manachare Tera Vanachare Jaya Radha Umarumba Kunya Vihare Vishnu Pad, Paramahansa Paramahansa, also Teta Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace Avaya Chaitanya Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Friends say Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Radha Shri Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Sayam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Machuranam Ki Jai, Chakaratha Sami Ki Jai, Mudamai Ki Jai, Srimati Lasa Devi Ki Jai, Sankar Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai, Gold Premananda. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharni Nivashesha Shindravadi Paschatya Jai Shatarni. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, 31st chapter, text 19. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Pashyate Ayam Dishnaya Nanu Sapta Vadre Sharirake Dhamma Shariri Apara Swadehe Yat Shristayasam Tam Aham Purusham Puranam Pashe Bahir Riddhi Cha Chaicham Iva Pratita Pasyatyayam Dishanaya Nanu Saptavadri Sharirake Dhamma Sharirya Parasvate Yat Shristiyasam Tamaham Purusham Paranam Oshe Bahiridi Chaicham Ivapratitam. I'll go a little slower, okay? Pasyatyayam Dishanaya Nanu Saptavadri Sharir Kedama Sharir Yapavrasvate Yat Shristiyasam Tamaham Purusham Puranam Ashe Bahir Ridi Chachaicham Iva Pratitam. Almost. What? No, I'll do one more time. Paschatyayam Dishanayana Sharirake Dhamma Sharirya Parasvadehe Yat Srishtiyasam Tamaham Purasham Puranam Asye Bahiradi Chaityam Iva Pratitam Okay.
Paschatyayam Dishanaya Tanu Saptavadri Sarirake Dhamma Sarirya Parasvadehe Yatsistayasam Tamaham Purusham Puranam Vashe Bahirinicha Chaityam Iva Pratitam
Paschatyayam Dishanayana Saptavadri Sharirake Dhamma Sharirya Parasvadehe Yat Srishtayasam Tamaham Purusham Puranam Asye Bahiriti Chaityam Iva Patitam
Ladies.
Paschatyayam Dishanayana
Paschatyayam Dishanaya Saptavadri Sharirake Dhamma Sarira Parasvadehe Yat Srishtiyasam Tamaham Purusham Puranam Viche Bahirvicha Chaityam Iva Pratitam
Okay. Pashyate sees. I am this living entity. Vishanaya with intelligence. Nanu only. Saptavadri bound by the 7 layers of material coverings. Sadirake, agreeable and disagreeable sense perceptions. Dhammashariri, having a body for self-control. Aparat, another. Swadehe, in his body. Yat, by the Supreme Lord. Shrishtiya, endowed. Asam, was. Tam, him. Aham, I. Purusham, person. Puranam, oldest. Pashe, see. Bahi, outside. Riddhi, in the heart. Cha, end. Chaityam, the source of the ego. Eva, indeed. Pratitam, recognized. So translation. The living entity in another type of body sees only by instinct. He knows only the agreeable and disagreeable sense perceptions of that particular body. But I have a body in which I can control my senses and can understand my destination. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whom I have been blessed with this body, and by whose grace I can see him within and without. So you can repeat. The living entity in another type of body sees only by instinct. He knows only the agreeable and disagreeable sense perceptions of that particular body. But I have a body in which I can control my senses and can understand my destination. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whom I have been blessed with this body, and by whose grace I can see him within and without. So purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The evolutionary process of different types of bodies is something like that of a fructifying flower. Just as there are different stages in the growth of a flower, the bud stage, the blooming stage, and the full-fledged, grown-up stage of aroma and beauty. Similarly, there are 8,400,000 species of bodies in gradual evolution. And there is systematic progress from the lower species of life to the higher. The human form of life is supposed to be the highest, for it offers consciousness for getting out of the clutches of birth and death. The fortunate child in the womb of his mother realizes his superior position and is thereby distinguished from other bodies. Animals in bodies lower than that of the human being are conscious only as far as their bodily distress and happiness are concerned. They cannot think of more than their bodily necessities of life, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. But in the human form of life, by the grace of God, the consciousness is so developed that a man can evaluate his exceptional position and thus realize the self and the Supreme Lord. The word Dhamma Shariri means that we have a body in which we can control the senses and the mind. The complication of materialistic life is due to an uncontrolled mind and uncontrolled senses. One should feel grateful to the Supreme Personality of Godhead for having obtained such a nice human form of body, and one should properly utilize it. The distinction between an animal and a man is that the animal cannot control himself and has no sense of decency, whereas the human being has the sense of decency and can control himself. If this controlling power is not exhibited by the human being, then he is no better than an animal. By controlling the senses, or by the process of yoga regulation, one can understand the position of his self, the supersoul, the world, and their interrelation, and everything is possible by controlling the senses. Otherwise, we are no better than animals. Real self-realization by means of controlling the senses is explained herein. One should try to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead and one's own self also. To think oneself the same as the Supreme is not self-realization. Here it is clearly explained that the Supreme Lord is Anadi, or Purana, and that he has no other cause. The living entity is born of the Supreme Personality of Godhead as part and parcel. It is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, Anadir Adir Govinda, Brahma Samhita 5.1. Govinda, the Supreme Person, has no cause. He is unborn, but the living entity is born of him, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Mame Vangsha. Both the living entity and the Supreme Lord are unborn, but it has to be understood that the supreme cause of the part and parcel is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Brahma Samhita therefore says that everything has come from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sarva Karna Karnam, again, Brahma Samhita 5.1. The Vedanta Sutra confirms this also. Janma Dyasya Yatha, also in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1. The absolute truth is the original source of everyone's birth. Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita, Aham Sarvasya Prabha. That's from 10.8 in the Bhagavad Gita. I am the source of birth of everything, including Brahma and Lord Shiva and the living entities. This is self-realization. One should know that he is under the control of the Supreme Lord and not think that he is fully independent. Otherwise, why should he be put into conditional life? So again, the verse. Pashatyayam dishanayan sattavatri sharirake tamasharirya parasvadehe yat srishtiyasam tamaham purusham puranam poshe bahiradi chachayjam ivapratitam. So Om Ganatam Mirandasya Gananjana Shalakya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shikara Maha. So there's quite a few topics in this particular verse and purport. And I'm going to try to touch upon a few of them. Of course, one of the topics, I'm just not going to take them in any particular order, is Prabhupada talks about evolution. And Prabhupada makes it very clear that evolution is an evolution in consciousness between the different species of life, not that one species of life evolves into another species of life. And just briefly, I'll explain why that is not possible. If you are at all interested in genetics, genetics means you're dealing with the genes, which are the DNA, the RNA, and I'm not going to get into the details of what happens in the cell, but even the scientists have analyzed that it is actually impossible for one species to evolve into another species. There may be minor variations within a particular species, but even for one new aspect of the species, like an arm or a leg or a wing or something to develop, is actually completely impossible using information theory, which our godbrother actually he analyzed this, that it's actually impossible using information theory. Information theory is the theory by which you can understand the possibility of something occurring, and it's basically impossible, that it's so improbable. So, anyway, so Prabhupada actually has very much stressed this idea of life comes from life, and also the impossibility of evolution. And Prabhupada spends so much of his time, energy, and even funds from the BBT to empower and pay for people to, scientists, in our society to delve into this, like Sariputta Prabhu and Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, to delve into this area and to show that the scientists' theories of evolution from one species to another are not only improbable, but impossible. So that's another point. So anyway, so here, when Prabhupada is talking about evolution, it's from the evolution of consciousness, which we're going to get into in a second, utilizing Prabhupada's analysis of the evolution of consciousness. So the next point I want to talk about before we get into the evolution of consciousness is the importance of having a human body. And this importance is emphasized in many different places in Prabhupada's books and the Vedic literatures, and I'm just going to quote two verses in this regard. One is from the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, spoken by Lord Rishabhadev to his sons. He had 100 sons, and of course the chief son was Bharat Maharaj. And a very important verse which Prabhupada would quote often, it's Nayam Deho Deha Bachamri Loke Kashtam Kamam Arhate Vidbhusham Ye Tapo Divyam Bhuchaka Yena Satwal Shudyad Yosmad Brahma Shoka Chwanantam. So this verse states that, my dear sons, Nayam Deho Bachamri Loke, you have actually taken a human body, the same topic that's mentioned in this particular purport. Anayam deho deha bhajamila kashtan kama. You should use this human body for the purpose for which it's intended. And then he speaks in a very heavy way about those who don't use this body for the purpose for which it's intended. Kashtan kaman arate vidbhujam ye. That you should not become like the stool eaters. And Prabhupada would oftentimes talk about, when he was making reference to eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, he would make reference to the stool eaters. Stool eaters, of course, means pigs and hogs. But it doesn't only mean pigs and hogs. Actually, the dogs are also stool eaters. All your favorite pets in America. How do I know that? One time I was living in the forest. I actually lived in the woods for about 15 years. When we first started our project at New Goloka. And we had a ditch to which we did our thing, which I'm not going to describe what the thing is. But anyway, it was like the outhouse. And so I was just wondering who was coming and cleaning. I thought, none of my disciples are that surrendered. And then I was watching, not that all day long I was watching. And I discovered there was a neighborhood dog who was coming in, taking remnants every day. So the animals basically, not only the pigs, although Prabhupada generally referred to stool eaters as pigs, the animals generally eat so many abominable things. And for a human being to engage in activities that simply compact with it, and eating, sleeping, mating, defending is no better than what the stool eaters do. Other examples Prabhupada used with the pigs is the pigs engaging in sex life. And Prabhupada also told this very interesting story, which is from the Vedic literatures, how when Indra became a pig, he became attached to that body. He just somehow or other became immersed in that frame of consciousness and attached to the byproducts of that pig body too. Don't worry, this is not a sannyas class. Once upon a time, just to tell the story briefly, once upon a time, Indra was cursed because he had offended his guru and others. He was cursed to become a pig. So he goes down to the Mississippi. I'm just making that up. And takes birth in a pigsty, and he has his whole nice pig family. Whatever. And the demigods, they think, we want him back. And so they go down and they say, it's time to come back, Indra. And he says, I don't know how he talked, oink oink, he said, no, I got too many responsibilities here. All these nice piglets to take care of. Got to wait until they grow up. And they're able to go to college and take care of themselves. I suppose he didn't say that. But, so basically, it was arranged that his whole family was, killed. And then he got detached. And that detachment, of course, is not real detachment. That detachment is called a smarshana vairagya. Smarshana vairagya means the detachment at the crematorium. Of course, there wasn't a crematorium for pigs. But still, it means the detachment when we see the nature of this material world. Just like I go to many funerals, at my age, you're knowing someone who dies practically every week. So we attend many funerals or, give blessings or prayers for people who passed away just about every week. And generally at the funerals, they recite Bhagavad Gita. And they appear to be pious or interested in self-realization. But then right after the funeral is over, or within a few months after that, they get back into their normal frame of consciousness. So that's called smarshana vairagya. That means renunciation at the crematorium. So anyway, Prabhupada did use this example of pigs, and Lord Rishabhadev uses it in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, as far as our great responsibility as having a human form of life. Other places, one of the verses that comes to mind is the verse from Prahlad Maharaj in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Very famous verse, which most of you know. Komaram achuret pragyo dharmam bhagavatam niha durlabha madasajatruvam tadatruvam artadam. The context of this verse being spoken after, in a second I'll give the translation, is that Prahlad Maharaj's friends are saying, we don't have time for self-realization because we're just kids. Just wait until we get a little older. Then we can engage in self-realization. That reminds me, I'm just a story within a story. That reminds me, one time a family brought their very old grandfather or father to Prabhupada and said, we want our father to be a full-time devotee. So please take him in the temple. And the father was pretty much disabled. So, and they said that you don't have to worry, the father doesn't have to worry about taking care of us anymore because he's given us all of his money. And Prabhupada said, this is not a very good deal. We get an old man and you get the money. So, anyway, apart from that. So Prahlad Maharaj's friends, they objected when Prahlad Maharaj told them to chant Hare Krishna. I'm sure you all know the story. And they said, we're just kids. And then, of course, Prahlad Maharaj sort of defeated that particular argument by telling them, throughout your whole life, you're going to have excuses. Now you have an excuse for your kids. Later on, you're going to excuse your, teenagers. Later on, you're going to have an excuse you just got married. Later on, you're going to give an excuse you have to take care of your children. Later on, I'm just paraphrasing. This is not the exact wording. Later on, you have an excuse you're an old person. I guess you have to play golf or something. And later on, you're going to have an excuse, you're disabled. So and also you have an excuse because 50% of your life, you're going to be sleeping. So many excuses, so therefore he says, Komaram achuret pragyo. And this word achuret is a imperative word in Sanskrit. Imperative means you must do. Komaram achuret pragyo. Pragyo means take up. Komaram, of course, means when you're Kumara, very small. Komaram achuret pragyo dharma bhagavatam niha, this Krishna consciousness. Why? Because durlava manasa dhruvam. There's that same statement. To have a human body is very rare or difficult to attain. Just like all of us sitting here in the room, hopefully we all have human bodies. But I guess news to you, not every entity in this room is a human being. And I'm not criticizing any of you, saying that you're not human beings, you're like pigs or anything like that. But the majority of living entities in this room that you can't even see, microbes and bugs and viruses and whatever, they far outnumber the number of human beings or people with human bodies in this room, isn't it? You just think about it. I mean, far, far, far. Where the number here is infinitesimal, even in this one room, this temple room. What to speak if you go out in nature, and I mean, just like right outside of where I'm staying, there's a nice colony of fire ants. I guess that's why I have 2 itches on my foot. But anyway, so fortunately I didn't stay on top of them for very long. So, I mean, there's billions, trillions, quadrillions, it's unlimited numbers of living entities. And we think we're so significant. You know, on this earth planet, we think we're so significant, just a few billion people with human bodies, and most of these people with human bodies are not acting like human beings, right? So anyway, so this is stressed by Prahlad Maharaj. From the very beginning, you should take up this Krishna consciousness. So we should think like that, because time is limited. We've been given this rare human birth, and as Prabhupada mentions in the purport, we should be thankful. Appreciation. Prabhupada mentions this in the purport. You know, we should be appreciating that the Supreme Lord has given us this facility. Another point is, what is it? Use it or lose it. If you don't use it properly, then Krishna will give the facility to others. And understand this facility belongs to Krishna. You know, Ishavashamidam Sarvam Yad Kincha Jagajam Jagat Tena Chiktena Bunjidham Agridhat Kashasvidadam. Everything is owned and controlled by the Supreme Lord, and He lends us things. Like this body is being lent to us. It's not your body. I mean, this whole argument about abortion and everything like that. It's my body. I can do whatever I want with my body. Well, first of all, it's not your body. Did you buy the ingredients? You know, how did you get the ingredients? Did you put it together? Just like did you purchase it? I mean, at least I have this little Kindle device. I can say it's mine. Not really, it belongs to Krishna, meant for use in Krishna service, but you know, I paid for the thing. But you just got this body, and you didn't put it together. You don't know. You can't even figure out, and the scientists, biologists, whatever, can't even figure out how this body is functioning. There's so many miraculous things happening in this body, the transmutation of matter. For example, the scientists, they've always, for years, they wanted to transmute matter. Transmute means you change one element into another. That's why they always try to produce gold, isn't it? But gold can be produced by this body. Like Prabhupada said, this process of alchemy. You've heard of alchemy before? Like turning base metal to gold. Prabhupada gave us the process. So why do you have to worry about raising money for a temple? You just use this process. I'll tell you what the process is. It's very easy. You drink a lot of mercury. And if you're alive the next morning, you urinate on the bell mat. But most of us will not be alive because we're not yogis. So that's the body. That's the point I'm making, is that Prabhupada indicated by that particular description that the body is transmuting elements. You know, that's amazing to transmute elements. It's like an atomic bomb. It takes an atomic bomb to change, hydrogen to split the atom, isn't it? And this is all happening within the body. And we have this, of course, this Jamadagni. Jamadagni means the fire of digestion. And we're taking this food and we're converting it to energy at a very efficient rate. I mean, you take an automobile, for example. Does anyone know what the efficiency of the automobile is? It's very low. Very low. I mean, it's below 50%, way below 50%. I don't remember the exact percentage. Because most of it, the energy when you're burning the fuel turns into what? Heat, or smoke, pollution, particles in the environment. Very wasteful, internal combustion. I mean, there's other machines that are a little bit more efficient, but the body is extremely efficient. I mean, it's amazing. And you're transmuting. I mean, you're eating broccoli. Hopefully, you're not eating meat. Anyway, you're eating broccoli and you're turning it into energy. Try that in your car. Right? Take some broccoli and put it in. I'm sure Dweebush will be very happy if you do that. You're able to power your car with broccoli. So, isn't it? I mean, see, you can, it's amazing what Krishna has done. So anyway, so you didn't produce it, you don't know how it's made, you get a vague idea. You know, scientists really keep guessing and guessing and guessing, and you know, the more they investigate matter, not only biological matter, but just ordinary matter, the less that they know, the more interesting things come up. So anyway, so if the body belongs to Krishna, that's the point of the Upanishad, Ishavashamidam Sarvam Yakuja Jagatam, and you're given something as a quota. So it's not your body, use it or lose it. So these are some of the points here. But I think the final point I want to make about this verse is actually, to me, it's much more interesting, and it can be used as far as our application is concerned, that the different levels of consciousness in different species of life, and not only that, but there's different levels of consciousness that people with human bodies exhibit too. And Prabhupada gives this analysis in several places in his books and his lectures. It's the analysis of, you know, Anamoya, you've heard of this before? Pranamoya, then Manamoya, Yanamoya, Vijnanamoya, and ultimately, what? Anandamoya. So let's get into that a little bit so we can understand our levels of consciousness, because this description is not meant for simply for us to criticize those who are not wearing dhotis or saris or Krishna consciousness, but to understand ourselves, what our level of consciousness is like, and what the level of consciousness is like in other people, insofar as how we approach, or when we approach, or how we deal with people. So let's talk about that a little bit. Anamoya is what? Does anyone know? Food. You know, the one, like a little kid, for example. You know, a little kid is sort of like a mixed Anamoya and Pranamoya, but let's just talk about Anamoya for a second. Anamoya is just like one's whole consciousness is based on food. Like the kid is crying. Also, there's the Pranamoya too, but the kid is crying because the kid is hungry in the middle of the night. Anybody, the ladies who have children know that the children wake up sometimes in the middle, not sometimes, many times, in the middle of the night and cry for food, and the mother has to feed the child. So that it's really consciousness about the eating, the hunger, and everything like that. So don't we oftentimes, just point it at ourselves, you know, myself or whatever, find ourselves in the same level of consciousness? Like you may be thinking, let's see, looking at your watches, okay, you got 15 more minutes for class, hopefully he finishes on time, and my stomach is talking, and I'm hungry. And you know, when you're really hungry, isn't it? It puts your consciousness on that level. I remember one time I was walking through the forest, one time not here, and I was so hungry. I was looking at the trees and just thinking maybe I could chew on them or something like that. There's something edible here. So oftentimes we fall into this level of consciousness, of the Anamoya consciousness. And we have to be honest, isn't it? That food. And of course, Prabhupada was very conscious of that level of consciousness being manifested in human beings. So Prabhupada actually spiritualized that sort of Anamoya consciousness and taking it and bringing us to Krishna consciousness. He spiritualizes. Does anyone know how? Prasadam, you got it. I mean, it's not that Prasada's on the level of Anamoya, we're on the level. So Prabhupada used our being on that level of Anamoya to bring us to Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada himself was cooking in the early days of the movement, and there was one devotee, I was reading the Prabhupada Leela Amrita, he would eat like 20 chapatis in one sitting, and Prabhupada would just keep rolling them. Can you imagine? Anyone who's made chapatis knows that when you have like 20 or 30 young men, and you have to feed them, how many chapatis was Prabhupada have made? Think about it. You know, this one person was 20. I'm sure everybody else was 5 to 6. So how was that? 5 to 6. Let's say you have 20 people, just to reduce the number. 5 to 6 times 20. You know, that's over 100 chapatis, 120 chapatis or something like that. It's hard. And Prabhupada took the austerity of preparing all those chapatis, and not only chapatis, I mean, there was dal and so many things. Prabhupada cooked very interesting. We learned in that way how to cook. Of course, the dal was extremely spicy, a lot of chili peppers. When we put the chaunts in, everybody would have to run out of the temple. I don't think you spice like that anymore. Probably not. Prabhupada emphasized, kitchen religion. You hear these statements by Prabhupada. Kitchen religion, right? Because generally people are on that level of consciousness. And also for us, who are not just us being on that level, but when we're dealing with people, just like we were talking yesterday about, a little bit about raising children, that generally the children, even though in the womb they may have these experiences or be conscious or be probably more intellectual than they will be later on in life. It's interesting, the description here is of the child in the womb. He's really brilliant. And most adults, I don't find them half as brilliant as this little child in the womb. So basically, after someone comes out, there's forgetfulness, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. The shock of delivery, whatever. There's forgetfulness, and the child just reverts to a really low frame of consciousness, which may never become more elevated even when they become adults, unless they somehow or other take up Krishna consciousness and become philosophers or something. So the child, most children are on that level. So when dealing with children, generally you have to be concerned with not only Anamoya, but what we call Pranamoya. That's the next level, right? Pranamoya means, sometimes Pranamoya is taken first, sometimes it's taken second, so don't get in my case about it. So Pranamoya, sometimes, Prabhupada gave different hierarchies at different times. So Pranamoya is bodily symptoms, like the touch, the feel, or wanting to avoid pain. Also why a child cries, because a child wants to avoid pain, right? So, but we also have, these bodily symptoms, just like we may like to play sports. And we'd like this, rushing around, the feel of adrenaline, right? Basketball, football, or cricket, for those of you from India. Then there's this, sensation already, like swimming. I'm not saying it's bad to swim or play sports. That would be wrong for me to say that. I mean, Prabhupada said we need some recreation. So it's not, I'm not criticizing those who do those things. But it's just like, that's the sort of thing we mean by pranamoya, the bodily symptoms. Just like breathing in fresh air. It's not that we stop breathing, but it's very pleasurable. Just like right now, in New York, you can't breathe in fresh air because they're having all these forest fires that are coming from Canada. So it's not pleasurable anymore. They go, if you go to Delhi, it's even worse. You can't even see from one side of the airport in Delhi to another side. Anyone's experienced that? There's a fog over Delhi. It's not fog, it's pollution. So that's the pranamoya. So when we deal with people, we really have, here's the point, how to, the application aspect. When we deal with people, we have to really understand what level they're at. And if we don't, we're committing the offense on chanting Hare Krishna, which preaching the glories of the Lord to the faithless. In other words, the way I usually explain that particular offense on chanting is that not understanding the person who we're talking to and presenting Krishna consciousness in a way to them that will turn them off from Krishna consciousness or cause them to commit an offense. So they're just like, I usually use this example. When I first walked into a Hare Krishna temple in 1968 or whatever, they preached to me in a way that was completely inappropriate. They attacked my attachments, my hair. Now I can't get attached to it anymore, it's involuntary. So basically it was Amarendra, my friend Amarendra, who was preaching, and he said, Kali Yuga is coming fast. Unless you join immediately, shave off your hair, everything like that, then you're going to be living underground, eating human flesh. So he looked at me, join immediately. I said, I'm out of here. So, and it took me directly meeting Prabhupada 2 years later to actually join the movement. Otherwise, I don't think I would have joined because the preaching was inappropriate. So when we approach people, whether it's children or adults or whoever, it has to be in accordance with what is their level of consciousness. And this also applies, can be connected somewhat to the Varnashram system. Are they Brahmin, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, or Shudras? Like for Shudra, for example, they're basically on Anamoya and Pranamoya platform, right? Manamoya, next level, they're speculators into the mind like that, Manamoya. Prabhupada describes that as speculation sometimes. And so, you approach these people a little bit differently. Or people want liberation, like Prabhupada talks about the different people, Krishna talks about the people who come to Krishna consciousness, Chaturvada Vajanti Mam, what is it? They're wanting wealth, they're wanting freedom from distress, that sort of a pranamoya type of thing. They're inquisitive, that's a little pranamoya, or they want knowledge, that's almost like vijnanamoya. Not precisely, the correspondence is there. So manamoya, speculation, vijnanamoya means basically, which is higher than manamoya, just speculation, is they want liberation, get out of the material world. And so they're acquiring knowledge in that regard. Vijnana is a realization. There's Jnanamoya, which is acquiring knowledge, and Vijnanamoya. Sorry, I messed it up a little bit. Jnanamoya means acquiring knowledge, and Vijnanamoya is when you get realization. And so this child in the womb in this particular purport is showing some Vijnanamoya there, some realization. However, that realization is not a steady platform, excuse me, until one comes to the Anandamoya platform. Just like in the process of devotional service, you have this whole hierarchy, Ado Shradadata, Sadhusangota, Bhajanat Kriya, Narta Nivritti Shad, then Nishta, then Ruchi, Ashakti, then Bhava, and then, yeah, why don't you give me, thank you. I appreciate that. I was thinking a little bit. And even if one is on the platform of Bhava, they can fall down, like Bart Maharaj fell down, right? And he became a deer. So only on the platform of Prema. So the platform of Prema is Anandamoya, or as Prabhupada right, Anandamoya Vyasa. So anyway, so it's important to understand these different levels of consciousness, not only insofar as this verse that we're reading today, but insofar as our own personal lives, being honest with ourselves, what is my level of consciousness, not thinking of oneself as more advanced than one actually is, and secondly also insofar as approaching others and managing others. Just like in a community like this, there's different devotees that are generally, and they're devotees, and that can be engaged, like prasadam engages people in Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada said you can eat your way back to Godhead. But that may not be the process for everybody. Or some people may just work for Krishna and not be super intellectuals. And other people may be intellectuals, so there's a way to engage intellectuals. And people into farming, they can go back to Godhead farming for Krishna. You can go back to Godhead preaching for Krishna. You can get, that's Varnashram. Everyone is equal, but you have to understand your position in Varnashram. It's not that you're lesser, but you're just serving Krishna in a different way. So it's important to understand these different levels of consciousness, and they can all be engaged in Krishna's service. So anyway, I guess that's it for today's class, because some people are thinking, Anamoya, it's time to eat. So any questions or comments? Yes?
Thank you for the wonderful class, Marge. When we're approaching people, I find when I come to the temple and I see a new person,
Yeah.
I don't go to the Krishna conscious philosophy so much. I go to the aspect of being kind and friendly,
Yes.
and welcoming them and saying how nice of you to come. And I'll say something like, we don't force people, because I know Prabhupada instructed us not to force people to do things. But I like saying, like, if you like, I can show you what we do here, like in terms of like dancing and
Right.
singing and stuff like that. So I find that an important aspect in meeting guests.
People, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That was precisely my point. That when you're dealing with people, what do they like to do, and what is their nature? And some people may come in just to eat.
Yeah, a lot of them.
And gradually people's consciousness goes up. I remember, of course, this is the story that Indradunya Maharaj told about this person named Pigpen. You've heard this story before?
He came here. He was a friend of Drew Miller.
Yeah, he's a friend of Drew Miller.
So he spent time in Brazil. This devotee, yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's heard the story, so I don't have to tell it again, or what? You don't know the story? Okay, once upon a time, years ago, before any of you were born, except for me, the devotees would go on Sankirtan in Paris. And there was always this person living in the bushes in Paris who looked like, he was a street person. Intoxicated, everything like that. Very dirty. And the devotees called him Pigpen. Pigpen, it's like a pig. So what happened is that one day, the devotees went with Prabhupada when he was visiting Paris, and they went on a walk with Prabhupada. And Pigpen tried to jump out of the bushes and basically touch Prabhupada's feet, and the devotee stopped him. And Big Ben actually went back to the temple. And when the devotees got back to the temple, they discovered Big Ben was there. And somehow or other, I guess it was Prabhupada, someone told them, don't throw him out, so they kept him in the temple and to do menial service like cleaning pots and everything. And the only thing he knew, he chanted, but the only thing he knew how to do was basically, the only words he could basically say was, Prabhupada, save me. So one day, the devotees went out to go out on traveling Sankirtan. Give me a second. They went to go out and traveling Sankirtan, and Big Ben was sitting in the van. And so they went in the van and said, Big Ben, go back. And he said, I'm going Sankirtan. All right. So they said, okay. So they all drove out to Sankirtan, and they got ready to eat their prasadam before they went out and distribute books. And Big Ben said, give me some books, however he said it, and I'll go out and distribute. So they gave him some books. This guy's crazy. So they gave him some books. He went out, and they were all eating prasadam. You know how the devotees, brahmacharis, they eat prasadam, and then they lie around a little bit afterwards, digesting the food. And Big Ben came back, and his book bag was empty. They said, Big Ben, where are the books? And it turns out Big Ben had distributed them all and gotten money for them all. And they said, Big Ben, what did you say to people? Prabhupada, save me. He just kept saying, that's all he said. Prabhupada, save me, Prabhupada, save me, Prabhupada, save me. Wow. Anyway, so that went on for some time. Eventually he became a big book distributor. And later on, when the devotees went someplace, they discovered that Prabhupada, that he was giving Bhagavatam class, and he was initiated and became a really good devotee. His name was Rasada. And he passed away from cancer recently. I had met him. And he became a really good, fixed-up devotee of Krishna consciousness. So it shows that, however we attract people, the process works as far as purification is concerned. Another one of my godbrothers, he was actually a good friend of mine, and I used to do Sankirtan with him. His name was Kusakratha. He was also, he couldn't speak, or, basically, anyway, everyone thought he was completely dysfunctional. And when in the early days, I went out Sankirtan with him, and if he distributed one book a day, it was actually a miracle. I was the Sankirtan leader. And then later on, the devotees, including myself, went back, visited Los Angeles, and discovered that not only was he giving Bhagavatam class, and he was a very erudite scholar, but he had translated all these books from Sanskrit and Bengali at a faster rate than anybody has ever translated books before, as far as I know. And he became a super intellectual, on a very high level of Krishna consciousness. And of course, he passed away, went hopefully back to Godhead, back to home, back to Godhead. So, it's just a question of engaging people in Krishna consciousness. The process works, but we have to understand how to engage. And Prabhupada did understand how to engage. Prabhupada even accepted that street person who brought in a roll of toilet paper while Prabhupada was giving a lecture. Prabhupada said he has done service. So that means being very compassionate, kind, and accepting of whatever people can do. Yeah, there's another question? Yeah.
I was just thinking how interesting it is that the Dhyana Moyas and the Prana, all that level is described in the Maslow pyramid.
Yeah, Maslow's pyramid, that's right.
Yeah.
The hierarchy of needs.
So, do you think he must have taken it from there?
Thinking of what?
Do you think he took it from the...
He might have. Maslow was quite intelligent. He studied some literatures, Vedic literatures too, yeah. It's very possible because, of course, I've read a lot of Maslow's stuff because I've adapted that to Krishna consciousness, and amazing his understanding of things, and it's very similar to the Vedic perspective. So for those of you who don't know, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs It's like a triangle that you have the basic needs of shelter, food, and everything like it. It goes up to what he calls self-actualization at the top.
And I just have two quick points. One is that, okay, now my mind went blank.
All right.
Okay, preaching the wrong,
Wrong
giving
way.
the wrong
Not connecting with people.
people.
Yeah.
In my case, Maharaj, it worked.
Well,
Yeah, because Sichukananda came to me and said, "Oh, look at you! You look so intelligent and you're so beautiful."
well, that was the right way to preach to
So
you.
my point
Good.
was, these people know.
Yeah, so that's the right way to preach. Yeah, according to your needs at that particular point. Yeah, whatever. So, Prabhupada actually said we can preach to someone, "Oh, you're so intelligent," like that. You're so intelligent, but forget everything you learned. So I would do that when I went on book distribution. I would say to people that, look, I'm not giving this book out to everybody. I noticed that, you have the intelligence to understand these things. And the person would say, yeah, finally someone's recognized me. Yeah.
Just reminded me of my grandson, Abhimanyu Sutta. He just recently took initiation, but he's a big book distributor.
Mm.
And they were in Miami, and he saw this lady, and they started videotaping them, and
Yeah.
he said, "Oh, I like your energy." And that's all it took. You look like a yoga instructor, and she was. And she took that clip and she put it on, not Facebook, what's the other one? Instagram.
Instagram, yeah.
Instagram, and it had tons of comments on it. Everybody was like, "I wish I would have talked to him," things like that. But what I really wanted to tell you was about the child in the womb. There was this lady that I went to school with, massage school, and she was telling the story of her sister's toddler. And she said they had, she was maybe 3 years old, and they had a new baby. And so the toddler asked if she could be left alone with the baby.
Mm.
Well, there's nothing scarier than to leave a toddler with a brand new
Yeah,
baby.
oh yeah.
So they were reluctant at first, but the child kept persisting that she wanted to talk to the baby alone.
Mm.
So in the nursery, they put the little baby in the car seat, and they put her on the floor, and the mother and the father left the room, but left the door slightly open so they could see and hear what was going on.
Mm.
And so the child, the toddler, looked around and went up to the baby and said, "Tell me about God, I'm forgetting."
Wow.
Tell me about God, I'm forgetting.
Oh my God, that's sweet.
Yeah, there's also evidence that children sometimes remember their past lives up until a certain point when they get older. They become more covered by conditioning. All right. Yeah.
One last thing, Maharaj, the broccoli will work. It is on Back to the Future movie. They put broccoli in the car.
All right. I will try that, but not in my car. All right. Thank you very much.
John,
All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.